this book club read the book, so that's a good thing. No, I'm kidding. All right. Well,
hey Tim, I won't let the fact that Anthony sent you be any judge on your character.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep an open mind. And also,
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend joining Peg either, man. Your profits are gonna go your profits are gonna go through the roof, and like you're not gonna have anything to do afterwards. It's terrible.
Tim, where are you located? Are you in New York?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Excellent. Very cool. Well, our headquarters are here in Pennsylvania. Lauren, take note. Let's send a very exciting peer groups hat to both these guys for attending today and helping out, since we have two of them there.
Good.
That was not that hat wasn't my selection, by the way, but I thought it's okay. I'm wearing it. I'm getting a lot of wear out of it, so it works. But okay, well, I appreciate everybody joining today. As you know, we have the first half up on YouTube, so we'll be focusing on the second half of the book, but that does not stop me from blowing through a quick summary of the first half so we can kind of get ourselves basically adjusted for the second half of the book. But let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm gonna go. And I think I can just throw this into, guys, make sure you can see the slideshow. You should be able to see it, right? Yep.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, so cool. So again, everybody, just a quick update. The only way I ever read a book and learn a book is if I do something like this, because I have zero retention when it comes to words. I'm great with pictures. So this book was pretty influential to obviously tons of people. We talked about how old it was. We talked about, the influence of this book on different people, such as Warren Buffett and Charles Manson and people like that. And I love the fact that at 87 years old, this book, he kind of gives you the quick summary at the front end. This is what you can expect to get out of life by getting more, into this book and using this book. So the agenda for the session is to get through two parts. Do you guys hear anything? I'm hearing like a weird.
Good, man.
Okay, you're hearing it good? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Okay, so we're going to get through the second part, which really focuses on part 3 and part 4. So we'll talk about that together as a group and just get everybody's takeaway on what some of that stuff might mean. Chapter 1, I had to mention, Crowleys are mentioned twice in this book. One is in the first half with Two Gun Crowley, and the other one is on the back end, which we'll talk about later. But chapter 1, really, the very beginning of the book is, I feel, the strongest part of the book, because he gets into story after story after story about what it means to get along, what it means to get along in society, what it means to get along with your peers, and to actually be trusted, be liked, and those types of things. So we kind of get into the good and the bad of that. So again, still chapter 1, quite a bit. We talked about some stuff that came out at the beginning of the 20th century related to that. Chapter 2, we talked about the big secret of dealing with people and what you might want out of life. And part of what was interesting to me was, the way people saw things almost 100 years ago is still the way that we see things today. So being human is being human, and it doesn't matter which century you're in. There's some great takeaways. Also loved the information and the dialoguing amongst the Andrew Carnegie, who's not related to Dale Carnegie, by the way, very strangely, and his impact with Charles Schwab and how they were able to kind of rise to their heights, both at U.S. Steel and Bethlehem Steel. Some great stuff about, stories like the story of the 6 roses. We got into the dealing with appreciation versus flattery and how to tell the difference, and also how to make sure that you are not using flattery, but using appreciation and gratitude. And again, anything you could do kindness wise became a big part of that principle. Give honest and sincere appreciation and kindness. And then chapter 3, we move on to arouse the other person an eager want. So how do I get somebody wanting something from me? And ultimately that's gone on to fuel both sales as well as leadership. How do I get people to follow? How do I, present something that is interesting to the customer? Now, I am going to include all of you in a second. I just need to get through the beginning part, so we'll just keep moving on this. Series of stories. Again, the imagery helps me to retain more of it. Ultimately, that first section of the book, we get through these first 3 principles, right? We're not going to criticize, we're not going to condemn, we're not going to complain. We're going to be honest and sincere with our appreciation, and then we're going to try to get an eager want out of others. Part 2, which we went into in the second half hour of the session, if you go check it out on YouTube, we got into these 6 items. And I'm just going to, since we have the slide up, I'll just mention it. Do this and you will be welcome anywhere. Simple way to make a good first impression. If you don't do this, you're headed for trouble. An easy way to become a conversationalist. How to interest people and how to make people like you instantly. So the 2 that we want to uncover here, do this and you will be welcome anywhere. And if you don't do this, you'll be headed for trouble. I just want to touch on those. So there it is right there. So that's what you need to do and you'll be welcomed anywhere. And of course, that has to do with smiling and having a jovial approach to life. I noticed that I was sitting in the waiting room at some physical rehab, physical therapy, and the people who are sitting there smiling are getting engaged, and the people who are not smiling are not getting engaged, right? So it clearly has something to do with that. We talked about birthdays, and I had Pee Wee Herman up there because he died during our first session, like the day before, and what he was known for was tracking people's birthdays. So, before the internet, before all that stuff, if you cross paths with this guy, he would remember you, he would remember his birthdays, and he kept track of it. And that's how, when he died, you might have seen on social media, there were probably more people coming out of the woodwork thinking they're Pee Wee Herman's best friend. So that was pretty ironic, I thought. So become generally interested in people, making that first impression, the smile we talked about. Principle 3, using a person's name, understanding and respecting who they are, remembering their names. This is, if this is one of your challenges in life, they kind of give you this as an example of different ways to kind of coordinate, remember names. Being a good listener, encouraging others to talk about themselves. We'll be getting into that. I use this as an example, how to interest people. For those of you who don't know me, I was way underqualified for my first job, but because I had my last interview with the managing partner of the firm, I was totally into all of his interests around his commercials that were coming out on TV. And because of that, it took the ball away from my inadequacies, and I was able to sneak my way into a job, which was great. So highly recommend that approach. How to make people like you instantly. This has to do with sincerity and also recognizing another person's superiority to you, right? Nothing wrong with identifying some positive qualities in somebody and making sure they understand that that's interesting to you and very valuable to you to know that. So we are now moving into part 3 and 4. So part 3, how to win people to your way of thinking. We're just going to start that off. Let's go to Garrett, since you are our guest of honor here. Tell us first how you found this book. Where did you find it from? And why has it been impactful to you before we get into this?
Yeah, so me and my family and my company, we have an extensive history with the whole Dale Carnegie brand and how to win friends and influence people. I first found the book probably a decade and a half ago on Dave Ramsey's recommended reading list. And, I was going through Financial Peace University personally, and eventually I was teaching it and chewing through all of Dave Ramsey's recommended reading. And that's where I found 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And, of course, How to Win Friends and Influence People was on the top. And after I finished the book, I, was just amazed at the efficacy of just every single little piece that I put into play, and kind of just sat back and watched it work. Like, holy smokes! I mean, this still works in 2015 or whatever it was, and ended up signing up for the Dale Carnegie class, which is a kind of a 13-week intensive dive into the teachings of how to win friends and influence people. It's a human communication public speaking course that you take with about a dozen other people, and you meet once a week for 13 weeks, and you got all kind of homework, and it's a really intensive class, and really enjoyed that. I ended up putting my wife, my sister, my mom, and about 6 or 7 employees so far through that 13-week intensive training, and then just kind of like stood back and watched in amazement and how it's impacted my business and my marriage and my family life. So hey, we're all big believers around here.
So I'm going to ask Charlie and Tim, but before I do that, I wanted to make a note that I had revisited this book. We used it for the very first leader group, which took place, I think, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, might have been longer. We had curriculum for our non-owner groups. And this was a book that we used in that session, and I really got to know it well. But one of the coolest stories I had was I love Blinkist, and Blinkist is like just a quick shortcut to every book, right? And my wife and I had to go down the shore 2 months ago prior to this. This was being assigned to me to read the book again, go through it, and run it as a book club. And so Lisa and I listened to it in the car via Blinkist, and it was impactful, like right away. Like I could see it almost like working in our marriage, because it's like, okay, yeah, I'll give you that. We're so proud, and especially when it comes to our loved ones, we have a tendency to be not this person, right? We're not going to take the loss, lose the battle, win the war. We're not built that way, I don't think. I think we try to. Yeah. Charlie will certainly say that for the workplace, but how about, so Tim, you picked it up and read it this summer. What was that about?
Yeah, so I actually bought it 2 years ago, and it sat on my bookshelf, and then I kept just seeing it pop up on book lists. I saw it on your webinar as well. I think when I watched Lawrence, the recording, so I watched it a couple days later, and I just finished a chapter too. So I finished it afterwards, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I find it amazing that it was written so long ago, and that the principles still ring true. I think it's one of those things that you do have to revisit, because there's a lot there. But no, it was spot on, and the points that he was making. I took a lot away from it. I really enjoyed it.
Very cool. Charlie, how about you? Oh, you're muted.
Gosh, it's been a long time since I've read it. I need to take a page out of Tim's book and go back and revisit it, and kind of what Dan said in the first session of, he says to review it monthly, right? Yeah. But really, it's all about getting along and being nice to people. So, I think that's important. In all walks of life, just like Garrett was saying, right?
So this third section, and I'm not going to call on you, Lawrence, you don't have to worry, but the third section on how to win people to your way of thinking really resonated with me, hit me hard. I've got a challenge in front of me from some business associates I work with, and I just find that they seem very disappointed with me quite a bit, right? It's one of those deals. I don't know how to explain what that is, but it's ultimately like, and Zoe and I are built the same way, and Zoe's my only assistant with relation to this other group. of individuals, and I can't seem to win an argument with them, even though I may have the facts lining up behind me. And that's painful because I try to find a way to word something in an email or call somebody on the phone and say, I hear what you're saying, but, I constantly, and of course I do that with my spouse, ad nauseum. So this first one on how to win people to your way of thinking, we're looking at principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. And the section's called You Can't Win an Argument. There's story after story in that section, the first chapter, where it's like, it doesn't matter if you're right, you're still wrong kind of thing. And they use I don't know if you guys remember the story. It was, I think they were at like a dinner party and some guy, he quoted the Bible, or he thought he quoted the Bible, but he didn't quote the Bible. He quoted Shakespeare. And the guy was ready to nail him on it and didn't. I mean, there were a couple great ones where it's like, all right, you're in a group of people. Do you want to be that guy that points out that a person's wrong and then lose the ability to influence them and win that person to your way of thinking? Because even if you're right, you're not right? So there's no way you could win that battle if you want to share the information later or some different way. But I find that is absolutely my biggest challenge. I was just always a know-it-all growing up, it's like, I know this, and I think it's hard not to continue that. So have you guys had any examples in your lives, and I'll open this up to you, Lauren, as well, where you knew you had it, but you just, you knew you had to bury it for that moment, and you had to, and Charlie, you can't use me as an example, but
how about me, Dave?
Yeah, Garrett's shaking it. So when I present to Garrett's group, he's in the back of the room shaking his head like, no.
It's not true, guys. Don't believe that.
Any examples on that one? And you can't win an argument.
Yeah. I got this in my notes to talk about, but I guess I might as well go ahead and talk about. So anybody who's ever been involved in the rental business knows that the rental sales counter is like the proving ground for these principles and how to win friends and influence people. And I'm sure like any type of customer facing relationship is kind of like this, but on a rental sales counter, you have very complex details and facts, whether it be the equipment or the timeout or hours or fuel or whatever it is, and lots of potential points of disagreement with a customer that may not be quite so as informed as you. And just being able to kind of sidestep those arguments and really put this principle into play has worked magic for my inside sales team. And we talk about it all the time. And so yeah, it's we see it all the time. And being able to just say, hey, listen, man, if what you're saying is true, we're gonna refund your money, and we're gonna take care of you over and above that. So just don't worry about that. Like if what you're saying is true, we're gonna take care of it. But let's just do a little bit of checking first.
I've known you for a while, Garrett, and I totally see you doing that. Like I see principle 1, 2, and 4. Like that has to be drilled into your people, because it does feel like you're always going to have like respect in the moment. And you're not going to call somebody out, and you're going to also be, obviously you got that Southern hospitality, that friendly approach to everything. So I've just
been wrong so much in my life, Dan. And I continue to be in a lot of things. So, I don't have any other position to take.
Yeah, you're like double now take that. I'm from the Northeast, right? So we get, too bad we don't have Anthony Durante on the line here, but you go to New Jersey, so we'll let Tim talk. But like principle 1, 2, and 4, do you see that in your business, Tim, at all? Can you pull that off?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of laugh at the Northeast comment, but because people
dig your heels in,
not necessarily friendly up here sometimes. But I found that it does make a big difference. And 3 as well. If you're wrong, say it and openly admit it. Hey, we're wrong. We screwed up. Whatever the case is. I really liked Principle 1 in the book, which is to avoid an argument at best. That's something I hadn't previously necessarily thought about.
Yeah.
But I like that a lot. And yeah, I do. And two, it's you want to tell someone they're wrong, and you may feel strongly about that, but you're probably better off not. So I overall, I think it was a collection of really good points that he made.
I found as I reread this, getting ready for today's session, I wanted to disagree with Dale Carnegie almost on every one of these. Like I was like, no, that doesn't. But then when you look at the full picture, like it totally makes sense. Like, of course, the end goal for this, and this might not be the end goal for everybody. I have a business consultant friend of mine who, ripped me a new one on a whole bunch of stuff the other day, and it was like, clearly not concerned with winning me over. So, but if it is your goal, and I do believe strongly that for businesses, you have to have that. You have to come at the world with this approach, because the last thing you need is somebody who has a distasteful experience with you and have that live out there somewhere. And these things
Yes.
allow you to kind of navigate that. It doesn't mean you're wrong, right? You're not acknowledging that that person's right and you're wrong. You're just basically saying, I want to successfully navigate this issue. But number 3, so I saved principle 3. I want to get feedback on this. So I get the opportunity to evaluate, and I actually don't evaluate. We do quarterly conversations in peer groups. And so I sit down with Charlie on a quarterly basis, and we have a quarterly conversation. Lauren and I sit down on a quarterly basis. How about principle 3? Does that come up? Like, from my perspective, I try to share with you guys if I'm wrong. But do I feel stingy with that acknowledgement of me feeling I'm wrong, or what is your opinion on that?
It might take you a while to admit sometimes when you're wrong.
It's so hard, man.
It is.
For everybody,
so
right?
hard.
Yeah, of course.
Well, the fact that I have 2 business associates on this call, I had to bring that out, because if I said that, I'm quick at saying, explaining I'm wrong. I'm not. That's probably my most difficult one. So get it out of the way quickly, identify it, mea culpa, go down that path, right? That kind of thing. So excellent. All right. So next part of this, because remember I think there are 12 principles on how to win people to your way of thinking, and there's 9 for the for the 4th final part.
Mm-hmm. So
the secret of Socrates. Does anybody remember this chapter? They starts out with the discussion of, how Socrates looks at things. But the principle that comes out of that is get the other person to say yes, yes immediately. So it's the verbiage that you use. Pulling it up here. Any comments while I'm looking this up?
Yeah, I think this is like, sales 101 for a reason. There's something psychological in our brains when we are talking to somebody and we begin to agree with what they're saying. It's like every yes builds strength to the relationship, or trust in that person. And if you can get 3 or 4 yeses out of somebody, typically, they're very willing to see your point of view on a sales transaction, or some type of issue that you're trying to work out with your spouse or your employee, or whatever it is. Those continuous levels of agreement that build on each other are very powerful.
The one I think of is, if, like, I have a person where we're always locking horns. So we've got four basic conversations happening that we're not happy with each other. But there's like 4 to 10 on the other side where we are. So when I read this principle, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why don't I begin with that part of the conversation? The whole yes, yes, the fact that, hey, we're in agreement that things are moving forward. Great. We agree we're in a better place right now than we were a year ago. forward progress on this problem, right? Yeah, everything's going the right direction. We agree that, the particular peer group is in a better place than where it was in the past. So there's all these things that we're definitely in agreement on. And then we have the ability to kind of address maybe the conflict. But I think that's a trick. There's absolutely to be able, especially when you're going into a conversation with somebody and you want to get that yes first. And where you see that is when there's a counter guy fumbling, or counter girl. They're fumbling through something and you're getting pulled in, right? You're kind of the white knight, you're coming in. And if you started out by focusing on the yes of the two parties, you can really, it does feel like you get them to kind of take down that guard a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The next one is a great one that goes hand in step with it, is this safety valve of handling complaints, right? So they used, on this chapter, they used story after story about, I think one of them was the guy had laryngitis and he couldn't speak. So the other person had to verbalize both sides of the discussion, and they resolved it with the guy having laryngitis, because it helped the other person see, like, both sides of the story without, being turned off by hearing your voice, coming at them. So that idea of letting the other person do a great deal of talking, and of course we learn that in sales, right? If you're there and you're just throwing features and benefits of that, earth moving equipment or that lift, you're not going to get them talking about where their pain points are, what would benefit them. So I always find that to be a sales focused one. How about principle 7? Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers.
Well, I think that really goes to let the person do the rest of the talk, the most of the talking too, because just in a equipment rental example, oftentimes if you're the owner or the manager and you get pulled into a situation between a customer and an employee, like the temperature is already way up. Like your sales counter guy had an issue, so it got kicked to his manager, and the manager couldn't resolve the issue with the customer, so it got kicked to you, and you're the third person that customer's talked to in your organization. And if you just pick up the phone and start telling this guy or girl how it is, that's going to go sideways. We know that because of these principles. And lots of times somebody who's went through the training in our organization can pick up the phone and start the conversation off with something like, hey, listen, we mess up all the time in this company, and if we have messed up in this situation, we really want to make it right. So could you, if you don't mind, just spend a few minutes telling me what's happened up until this point, and just let that person talk for as long as they want to talk. And 60% of the time they solve their own problems by the time they're through talking. Right? And you don't have to do anything. And to an outside observer, it looks like voodoo. But I mean, it works so often that it's something we use in the office and on the sales counter here at Badger a lot. We just let them talk.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. I think the other thing that keeps coming to mind as you're mentioning this is ultimately this is about discipline, right? Because when you don't stick with these principles, it's because you're tired, you're exhausted, you're getting lazier, maybe end of day type stuff. I looked at some of the emails I sent out yesterday in the afternoon versus the morning, and they were lazy and ultimately got me in trouble with, I didn't do my research before I pushed something out. I was rushing through it. But ultimately, when you're dealing with a person, there is a discipline to your behavior that you need to hold to. So like you're mentioning your employees on the counter, I could not imagine owning a business where my employees exhibited these principles like and I'm thinking more in terms of when I own Subway franchises and collision centers, right? Like for them to verbalize that way and get them through that issue and let them talk themselves out. I couldn't imagine. So I do appreciate, you getting this contents of this book into the heads of those around you. I think that's great. And I think principle 8, try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. That's a good one. That's something that, and I think of my marriage, as the place to exhibit that. Like, I'm so sure I'm right about things. And sometimes you just gotta like say, you know what, from that angle, that probably makes sense. So, you need to look at that. All right, let's get to the last part of this third section. And Garrett, we'll still have plenty of time. We got 8 minutes with you left. So
awesome. Good
how
Lord,
to win
time's
people
flying by, man.
Yeah, right. How to win people to your way of thinking. So the first chapter, or I should say, third section of the third part of this particular section, be sympathetic with other person's ideas and desires. So that goes to the previous one. I kind of group principle 8 and 9 together, because a lot of times it's just whether they're right or wrong, they have a desire, right? So you might find yourself in conflict. Charlie and I might be arguing about content for our upcoming Rental Leaders Boot Camp. And ultimately, he has a goal because he has a desire to share a certain part of it. I might be like, we don't have time for that, but he knows it would be beneficial for them to experience, behavioral analysis, disc profiling versus, us drilling more content in their heads. So that's, the person that you are being awake enough to look at the person in front of you and know that, they have ideas and desires that you may not have any idea. Right. So that's part of what it is to find it out. And you can imagine person walking into a rental operation and having an issue to fix. I was working with an equipment rental operator in Pennsylvania, and this woman wanted to use a forklift to lift up the edge of a barn, like a corner of the barn. And she was so sure what she wanted, and she just wanted my help getting the tool. Give me this forklift and we'll make it work. And man, like when I brought it to the equipment rental operator, they did such a great job of unpacking it and really finding out like the motives behind it and really understand what the end goal was, and got a customer for life out of this deal because just really, unpack the whole thing. So I'm sure you guys have examples of stuff like that in your businesses.
Oh, that happens every day at the rental counter, right? I mean, somebody walks in they say, I need tool A. And the first question we always asked was, well, what are you doing? And just asking that right there, you could get just exactly like what Dan says, you get to what they're really trying to accomplish and what tool they really need to get the job done.
Yes.
Also, I think,
yep. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go off of what Charlie was saying. Oftentimes we would get a call on the sales counter and somebody wants to rent a mini excavator with a hydraulic thumb. And what they want to do with that piece of equipment is tear down a house or clear a piece of property with, adult trees on it. And everybody on this call knows that is not the appropriate piece of equipment. And they're headed for disaster, and we're headed for an argument and, potential financial loss of a very expensive piece of equipment. So, if you can, kind of drill down and ask them, what are you thinking? Like, why do you want this piece of equipment? What's the result that you're really after? You may be able to rent this person the appropriate piece of equipment and, have a good transaction, or B, really save this person from disaster, like, being unsafe with a piece of equipment, or, ruining a $85,000, tractor that they had no idea that this wasn't the right tool for the job. I guess they should just write like the sales counter, the rental sales counter version of How to Win Friends and Influence People, and we could replace all the examples
Right.
in the book with. We should make a coffee table book, Dan.
Right.
That's right. Let's do
There
it.
you go.
Have like a picture book, easier for
There you go.
following. I
That's
would
right.
also argue, like, and Charlie, you echo in here, 10 event rental operators sitting in a peer group talking about their customer experiences. And, not only is it about matching, their desires and listening to them and knowing what they want, but the expectations, right? So like a lot of times equipment rental, tool rental gets away with, getting them to the starting line and then it's on them. But when it comes to event rental operators, if the experience doesn't match the expectation of the customer, so you really need to have that conversation too. It's not just about, how what you're gonna rent, what you're gonna use, but then what ends up happening. Lauren just went through a wedding this past weekend, and you were a key role in that wedding, right? Did you get involved with, or did you see what was going on with like the event planning element of it?
Yeah, I was able to kind of see it all, which there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, I would never think of like just little things that pull it all together, but yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So
on the other side of that, on the event side, is the budget. People have an expectation and what they want, and then sometimes you have to let them know that what they want might not be in their budget, and that's difficult too.
Yeah, absolutely. The next ones, I got appeal to the nobler motives. I get that. The 11 and 13 or 11 and 12 were interesting to me. Dramatize your ideas. So I get, like, I keep thinking like this is written 87 years ago. And I know there have been pieces of the book that have been touched up, but I'm like, movies really back in 87 years ago. But the idea was to win people to your way of thinking, add that extra emphasis on how you present it, right? So if you are a company, that's why we go through the vision of your company, the values of your company, identifying how you want to present yourself to your customers and the market in general. You have to get out there and dramatize it a bit, right? Show you care to your target, and so you're dramatizing some of that element. And so that was interesting. I was shocked it was in this particular section, but there it is. And then the last one was, when nothing else worked, try this. So it's like throwing down a challenge, and I just drew a blank on this. So I don't know if you guys remember this. It's such a random one in the back here. Here it is. So throw down a challenge. The stories were specifically about.
Was it Henry Ford who wrote the number of cars they made in chalk on the floor that night, and then the next shift came in and
dude, how do you remember that? So it was Schwab.
They built 12 cars last night. I bet we can build 13. I think it was Henry Ford.
Yeah, that was it. It was Charles Schwab, and that's right. And he kept. They kept doing it. And then I know in other books I've seen it where people misinterpret a challenge, and it's a bigger challenge than even the guy intended, but they still rise up to accomplish it. So very similar mindset of throwing down a challenge and creating big, audacious, they didn't call them big, hairy, audacious goals back then, but that's essentially what we're talking about. So going back to your principle 11, if you have the ability to throw down a challenge or create that hairy, audacious goal, why not promote it, whether it be to your associates, to get them in the same mindset, get them thinking the same way, or even your customers. So,
yeah.
All right.
So the last two, dramatizing your ideas and throwing down a challenge, I think of EOS. And I think of when the department has a number, or when that individual has a number they are responsible for, the old adage, what gets measured gets improved is real, because
Yep.
I mean, no matter who you are in an organization, whether you're, producing X amount of nuts and bolts a day or whatever it is, you don't want to see that number go down. I think you
That's
can
right.
the power to make it go up, and with the dramatizing your ideas thing, like the whole developing a proven process graphic in your company,
Yeah.
and like showing what you do and how you do it in a graphical way. It's been really powerful here at Badger, because I mean, it just really puts into brings the words to life.
No, that's awesome.
In a way that just the text couldn't.
No, you're dead on with both of those, and I do agree that traction in EOS, focusing on that VTO element on the front end, really jumpstarts a business going that direction. And then to the point where you start to have a metric for every person. I just did an L10 with a company with 30 employees, and they had metrics for everybody. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like and when they do their quarterly conversations, they go over the metrics with each other. So it's kind of cool. But Garrett, I think you might need to bolt. I'm not sure if you're going to. Okay, well, appreciate you being here, and thanks for participating. And again, we're looking for you to participate in a couple podcasts coming up. So we'll make sure to reach out. So we're going to just cover.
Thanks,
take
Garrett.
care, Garrett. So we're going to cover the last section. So this is it. There's only 9 of these, so we'll touch on these. Be a leader, how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. It's a long chapter title or section title. So the first chapter really is, if you must find fault, this is the way to begin. So again, this gets into, you can't just snow a person. There's going to be times when you're going to need to resolve and get to a bottom line for yourself. And so they say, if you must find fault, this is the way to begin. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. Totally agree with that. I would say anybody who's ever evaluated a person's performance or had a quarterly conversation with an employee, it certainly feels like it works for me. Anybody have anything on that one? Or customer?
I mean, I would agree with that completely, right? Like start with the good news, right? And even also wrap up with the good news.
Well, and again,
bring
you
it
could
full
look.
Circle.
Yeah, I mean that's great, and I think you may have a very good distinction by using the word good news, because that's different than praise and honest appreciation. I actually like it. I think that, there's good news, right? Let's talk about what that good news is and get that identified. All 4 of these principles on this slide are kind of connected and related. So how to criticize and not be hated for it is, again, we're going to get into where there's a miscommunication or misunderstanding, and call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. So one of the things I found with working with rental operators is you really spend a lot of time identifying the supervisors or the people who are kind of corralling the yard, or we got a lead mechanic, or we have a mechanic manager or something like that, and then certainly on the front, we may have a branch manager or something like that. But to me, calling attention to people's mistakes indirectly, I've always used the enemy as the paper. So, I know that this can mean different things, but in one way I see it is, if there is metrics, if there are things that are measured and evaluated, and you're not able to reach certain heights with it, it's not you discussing it with John Doe, that you're making mistakes. It's the fact that, hey, the enemy's the paper here, and the paper's saying we're not getting these numbers. So what can we do together to make this happen, right? So you're calling attention to the mistake, but you're doing it indirectly by identifying, not being able to hit a goal or something like that. Thoughts on that? If anybody here's ever used that? I know, Charlie, you had employees before.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the going back to the metrics that you were talking about, where 30 employees and everybody had a number, like that makes it so much easier to evaluate and to pull that stuff in without saying, hey, last week you guys screwed up 17 times or whatever the case might be, right? Like you can kind of come at it a little bit softer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I would say following up with that is principle 3, talking about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. So it's very important, I feel, like when you read this particular chapter, you're able to identify like, hey, we all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. There is no perfect. And so as long as people understand that, they've got a chance to overcome it without being aroused to resentment, right? That's
Sure.
essentially the goal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, look, this is about improvement. This isn't about like poking the bear and getting you upset, right? So let's make sure we do that. And then the last one is just reminds me so much of the book How to Be a Great Boss by Renee Bohr, which is part of our Rental Leaders Boot Camp, where it literally, when you're sitting down with somebody, you're asking questions. And I go back to what Garrett shared about his customer experience, right? Like ask the question, have them talk, let them do the talking.
Yep.
When you're doing a conversation with an employee, let them do the talking, right? I think that's the key.
Yeah.
How about so you've seen the content there, Charlie. What about asking questions from a perspective of managing an employee or leading an employee? Any thoughts around that?
Not so much around employees, but more like going back to the customer thing and, asking them about their experience or asking them what happened and letting them, kind of expand on it, where to make them feel like they're in control and they're the one giving out the information versus us being like, well, hey, you hit that skid steer into a tree and that's what broke it. Like you can kind of get them to kind of come to the same conclusion by kind of letting them speak and let them kind of talk through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yep. I think that's huge. One of the things I learned really early on in the military was to ask questions, and you get such better results. I mean, even if it's something, if you brief a plan or go over some information, ask someone to brief it back to you. There's that aspect of it, but then there's just other questions to get to what you're looking for. I think it's a very, very effective way to go about things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tim, what does your organization structure look like right now? How many employees? And
you're looking at it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're starting to
easy to have
out.
meetings.
Oh, absolutely. Very flexible.
Easy. We can set goals easy. Well, again, we welcome you to participate on any level with our peer group stuff, because we have webinars and we certainly have meetings and stuff like that you can attend. But I love when it's free and it's online and we can do stuff.
Right.
All right, so this is the last, I believe it's the last slide, but there might be one more. But this one is great because you're letting the other person save face. And there's some praise involved in the 6th principle, which I like, right? So these do not come naturally to me. I'm like the worst at praise, right? You guys are both laughing, I can see.
No, I think you told me a good job the other day. You do it every once in a while.
Yeah, I think you're good.
All right. I appreciate that. Trying to be better. Although I will make a comment here, and I know this is being recorded, but my wife has said this to me, and I think, Charlie, your wife has said this to you. You're nicer to your coworkers, your associates, than you are to me, right? So it's kind of like,
not.
and well, I get it all the time, and I'm like, well, I'm trying to get them to do things. But the other one is give a dog a good name. I thought that was hilarious as a chapter title. because you're putting them in a position to win. Like, and I'm just gonna poke at you, Lauren, on this one. Lauren could be the vice president of marketing. She could be the director of marketing and sales, whatever title she wants to go with. Ultimately, I don't want her being the marketing administrator or marketing admin or anything like that, because that's not what I want from her in terms of output, right, for the company. So I want her designing the department. I want her identifying the goals. Tim, one of the things that we did at the beginning of the summer was I had a meeting with each of these two individually, and I think the meeting was called like Charlie Inc. or Lauren Inc. And I said, let's manufacture your individual company, like inside the company. What does that look like? Because I want everyone in the company to have ambition and to be autonomous and build out their own business inside the business kind of thing. And I think that can apply absolutely in a lot of regards to rental operators as they start to build out their work chart. So whoever you hire next, if they're working on, especially in your situation, you're going to want an autonomous number 2 and potentially a number 3, because if you do that, they're not just sitting there twiddling their thumbs waiting for Tim Allen to make the sale and get the stuff ready, right? It gives you this potential of working alongside each other and getting a better value from it. And that's really how peer groups grew. It wasn't like I wasn't doing everything. And people weren't sitting in the back looking to support it. It was like we had to all be autonomous. The first person I hired was a DI, right? So if you ever know anything about behavioral analysis, disc profile, it was Zoe. Zoe is autonomous and very influential. So she looks to get things accomplished through others. And it was a great number 2. I could have hired somebody who would have been like a virtual assistant, and they could have been very conscientious and steady. But ultimately I needed almost to have that kind of somebody alongside me as we grew the business up. So I see that in rental. I mean, I see it every time you see a rental company get to that next stage. What about number 8? Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. So that's a good one. Any examples of something like that? Nobody's really, in our company, nobody's really crashed the bus into a wall, I would say. Can you think of any, Charlie?
Nobody died is the famous word that Nikki uses
nobody died
in her meetings. Nobody died. It's all right.
Who was
we
that?
can fix it. My wife, Nikki. I hear that floating around in her meetings when something gets screwed up.
It's funny.
Yeah. I can't think of anything that comes to mind.
Well, I think we are, as a company, we are self-prepared for it. Like, we know that we've got a lot of good things going on in peer executive groups, just like our peers do in rental. And in the rental industry, year after year of success, and all of a sudden 2023 hits, and it's like, okay, if I'm focusing on the homeowner market, we know it's been flat. But good news, bad news, like we knew that this correction was going to take place. And we also know that it's going to move on from here. And just so Tim, Charlie and I are involved with looking at economic lead indicators for the industry. And one of the things that came out recently was that the homeowner market has bottomed out. So the lead indicators now are moving to the next level. And that's good. That means we're in a position where we can start buying the small equipment again, because we kind of put a hold on buying the small equipment. Maybe not for you as you grow into the business, but for those that are mature and sitting in the business, it was like, hey, slow down on that for now. All right, so last principle, last chapter, making people glad to do what you want. Principle 9, making people happy to do what you suggest. So this one I felt was a little weird in terms of how he presented it. But when you look at the actual chapter, the stories are a lot easier to digest. So it's the idea that if you do the other principles, this principle starts to happen on its own. So you might have specific goals for yourself as the leader of your organization or the leader of a group. And if you abide by the initial principles, this last principle starts to kick in where people are like, yeah, you know what? This all makes sense, especially considering how I'm being treated. So it goes back to how a person's treated. The book itself ends with a little story about that Lowell Thomas puts in. He actually ended up having his own autobiography, I think he wrote, but the title of this little essay is A Shortcut to Distinction, talking about Dale Carnegie and Dale Carnegie's classes and things like that. But when I was looking it up, it popped up inside Google as its own explanation, and it says a shortcut to distinction means the ability to speak is a shortcut to distinction. It puts a woman in the limelight, raises him head and shoulders above the crowd. So it's that ability to speak, which again, Dale Carnegie, majority of his activity is around speaking, but also influencing and being popular and winning friends and things like that. So that's the way the book ends. Voila, book club webinar number 2 is complete. Any questions, comments?
Good job.
Yeah, I like it.
I enjoyed it.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of valuable information.
Yeah, so again, this was part of our quarter that was focused on people, correct, Lauren? Right, people. So every quarter we identify either, do you know what the next quarter is yet, Lauren? For October?
Execution.
Execution. So October, November, December is going to be about execution. We'll identify a book that we'll do a book club on about execution. And if anybody has any suggestions, feel free to email them into us. And again, we'll have a webinar. So we'll have the webinar, we'll have the podcast, and I think that's it, right?
And YouTube, yeah.
YouTube, yeah. So we'll identify something. So that way, every 3 months, a person can click through these and get their little piece of that. The other 2 quarters that we focus on, other than people and execution, is we look at strategy in the first quarter and we look at cash in the second quarter. So cash is the money management one. But Tim, we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was a great discussion.
Yeah, if we have any stuff in the Northeast, by all means, we'll make sure to let you know, and you can shoot over and join us. But
Yeah, absolutely.
And check out Area of New York if you've never been to that. That's cool. New Jersey was good. I actually spoke at the Area of New Jersey, so that was a good one too. But both those are other great resources to just go and meet up with your peers in the rental industry. So
awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for the heads up. I appreciate it.
Very cool. All right, thanks guys.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
See ya.
Okay, bye.